Beloved child, know this truth before anything else settles in your mind or heart. You are not forgotten, you are not abandoned, and you are not weak, even if the world has tried to convince you otherwise, because strength is not always loud and courage is not always visible, and many of the greatest battles you have fought were never seen by human eyes but were carried quietly within your soul, where doubt whispered lies and fear tried to claim territory that never belonged to it. Remember that light does not disappear simply because darkness speaks loudly, and truth does not lose its power simply because confusion surrounds you, for every step you have taken through uncertainty has been witnessed, every tear you have held back has been counted, and every moment you chose to stand instead of surrender has shaped you into someone far stronger than you realize. And when you feel tired, it is not because you are failing but because you have been carrying more than you were meant to carry alone. Release the weight of fear that tells you you must control everything, for control was never your calling, trust was, and trust does not mean you will never feel afraid, it means you move forward even when fear speaks, choosing truth over illusion, courage over comfort, and faith over panic. Understand that clarity does not arrive through force but through stillness, and when you quiet the noise of comparison, expectation, and self-judgment, you will hear the steady reminder that you were created with purpose, not by accident, not as an afterthought, but intentionally, with gifts that awaken when you walk in integrity and alignment with what is right. Do not measure your worth by how quickly others succeed or how easily they are praised, because your path was never meant to mirror another's journey, and the delays you resent have been shaping your discernment, your resilience, and your wisdom, preparing you to stand firm when others fall, and to speak truth when silence would be easier. When fear rises, do not fight it with anger or shame, but meet it with awareness, recognizing it as a signal rather than a sentence, a message that something within you is ready to grow, because fear often appears at the threshold of transformation, attempting to guard the door to your next level of becoming. Choose honesty with yourself, even when it is uncomfortable, because self-deception weakens the spirit, while truth strengthens it, and when you align your thoughts, words, and actions with what is just and sincere, you step into a protection that is not fragile, not temporary, but steady and enduring. Understand that courage is not the absence of trembling but the decision to act with integrity despite it, and every time you choose compassion instead of bitterness, clarity instead of chaos, and discipline instead of distraction, you sharpen the inner strength that cannot be taken from you. Do not turn your wounds into walls, for isolation may feel safe, but it was never meant to be your home, and while discernment teaches you when to step back, love teaches you when to remain open, because healing does not ask you to harden, it asks you to become whole. Remember that justice begins within, in the way you speak to yourself, in the standards you hold when no one is watching, and in the choices you make when shortcuts present themselves, and when you choose what is right over what is easy. You align yourself with a force far greater than momentary gain. Release the belief that you must be perfect to be worthy, for growth does not demand perfection, it requires willingness, humility, and persistence, and every honest effort you make matters more than flawless appearances. When you feel surrounded by opposition, pause and observe rather than react, because reaction feeds confusion while awareness restores authority. And in that still awareness you will remember that your spirit is not powerless, your voice is not insignificant, and your Presence carries weight when it is rooted in truth. Trust that guidance often comes quietly, not through dramatic signs but through subtle inner clarity, repeated nudges toward integrity, and the steady call to choose what aligns with your highest values even when no one applauds. Understand that strength is built through consistency, not intensity alone, and small daily choices toward honesty, discipline, kindness, and courage create a foundation that storms cannot easily destroy. Let go of resentment, not because others were right, but because your peace is more valuable than replaying what cannot be changed, and forgiveness, whether extended outward or inward, is not surrender but liberation, freeing your energy to move forward rather than remain anchored to pain. Recognize that you are allowed to rest without quitting, to pause without giving up, and to reassess without failing. Because wisdom knows when to advance and when to recalibrate. Do not underestimate the power of alignment, for when your intentions are pure and your actions reflect them, resistance loses its grip, confusion fades, and confidence emerges not as arrogance but as grounded assurance. When doubt questions your ability, respond not with argument but with action, because action rooted in truth silences doubt more effectively than explanation ever could. Remember that discipline is not punishment. It is devotion to the life you are building, and every boundary you honor protects your energy, your clarity, and your future. Choose to be vigilant with your thoughts, for what you repeatedly entertain becomes what you eventually embody, and when you guard your mind with truth, courage, and discernment, you cultivate an inner environment where fear cannot easily take root. Know that you are not required to carry everyone else's burdens to prove your worth, and compassion does not mean self-erasure. Because true service flows from wholeness, not depletion, when uncertainty clouds your direction. Return to what you know is right rather than obsessing over what is unclear, because truth is often simple even when outcomes are not. Understand that protection does not always look like avoidance of hardship, but often appears as strength within it, clarity during it, and growth because of it. Do not be discouraged by slow progress, for deep roots grow quietly, and what is built with integrity endures longer than what is rushed for approval. Allow yourself to evolve, to release identities that no longer fit, and to step into responsibilities that once intimidated you, knowing that growth often requires leaving familiar comfort behind. Remember that courage is contagious, and when you stand firmly in truth, you give others silent permission to do the same, even if they never tell you. Choose to speak with intention, to listen with discernment, and to act with purpose, for words carry weight, silence carries meaning, and actions leave lasting impact. When you feel overwhelmed, return to breath, to stillness, and to the present moment, because power does not exist in imagined futures or replayed pasts. It exists here, now, in the choice before you. Trust that resilience is already within you, shaped by every challenge you survived, every lesson you learned the hard way, and every time you rose again after believing you could not. Do not fear standing alone if necessary, for integrity has often required solitude before it inspires unity, and it is better to walk briefly alone in truth than to remain comfortably surrounded in compromise. Know that your life is not measured by applause but by alignment, not by perfection but by persistence, and not by ease but by integrity. When darkness attempts to intimidate you, remember that light does not negotiate with shadows, it simply stands, and in standing, it transforms the space around it. let your faith be your you of who you are when the world tries to label you otherwise. Choose courage daily, even when it feels ordinary, because consistency in courage reshapes destiny. Understand that your soul carries wisdom older than your current circumstances, and when you listen inwardly with honesty and humility, guidance emerges. Walk forward with calm determination, knowing that every step taken in truth strengthens the path behind you and illuminates the path ahead, and no matter how uncertain the road may appear, alignment with what is right ensures that you are never truly lost, for you are protected not by force but by integrity, not by fear but by faith, and not by perfection but by your unwavering commitment to walk in truth, courage, and light. Continue forward with steady resolve, because the path you are walking was never meant to be easy, it was meant to be true, and truth often requires endurance before it reveals its reward. Understand that not everyone will recognize your growth, not everyone will celebrate your discipline, and not everyone will understand your silence, but approval was never your destination, alignment was. And when your inner world is aligned, external validation loses its power over you. There will be moments when old patterns attempt to return, when comfort tries to lure you backward, and when doubt disguises itself as logic. But remember that regression often feels familiar while growth feels uncertain, and choosing growth repeatedly is how strength becomes embodied rather than imagined. Do not confuse peace with passivity, for peace is active, alert, and grounded, capable of firm boundaries and clear decisions. And when you protect your peace, you protect your ability to see clearly, speak honestly, and act wisely. Recognize that your sensitivity is not a weakness but a form of intelligence, allowing you to discern shifts in energy, intention, and truth, and when balanced with discipline, sensitivity becomes insight rather than overwhelm. You are allowed to outgrow people, places, and beliefs that once sustained you, and releasing them does not dishonor the past. It honors the present version of you who now requires something deeper, stronger, and more aligned. When responsibility feels heavy, remember that you were not chosen because you were flawless, but because you were willing, and willingness combined with integrity creates capacity over time. Do not rush outcomes in moments of impatience, because clarity matures through patience, and decisions made in calm awareness carry less regret than those made in emotional urgency. Understand that discernment sharpens when you listen more than you react, observe more than you assume, and respond from grounded truth rather than wound impulse. When you face resistance, do not immediately assume you are on the wrong path, for resistance often appears when you are stepping into greater alignment, challenging systems, habits, or expectations that benefit from you remaining smaller. Choose to cultivate inner order, because a disciplined inner life creates stability even when the outer world fluctuates. And discipline practiced privately builds confidence that does not depend on circumstance. Remember that humility is not self-denial, it is self-clarity, knowing your strengths without arrogance and your limitations without shame, and from this clarity comes steady growth. When you feel the urge to explain yourself excessively, pause and remember that truth does not need constant defense, and those meant to understand will recognize alignment without persuasion. Allow your actions to speak consistently, for consistency is louder than promises and more convincing than words. When loneliness arises, do not interpret it as abandonment, but as a season of refinement. where distractions are removed so discernment can deepen and purpose can sharpen. Understand that solitude teaches you to hear your own inner guidance without interference, strengthening trust in your own integrity. Release the habit of self-criticism disguised as humility, for kindness toward yourself strengthens resilience far more than harsh judgment ever could. When mistakes occur, treat them as teachers rather than verdicts, extracting wisdom. Without attaching identity to error, remember that power rooted in truth does not rush, intimidate, or manipulate. It remains calm, precise, and grounded, and this calm authority is something you grow into by repeatedly choosing integrity over impulse. When you feel unseen, trust that unseen roots are growing, and what develops beneath the surface often supports the greatest visible strength later. Do not underestimate the influence of your presence, because grounded individuals stabilize environments simply by being aligned within themselves. Choose restraint when provoked, not as suppression but as mastery, knowing that not every challenge requires immediate response, and silence chosen consciously can be more powerful than words spoken reactively. Allow your intuition to be informed by wisdom rather than fear, and your logic to be softened by compassion rather than control, for balance between heart and mind creates clarity that extremes cannot. When uncertainty persists, return to your core values, because values function as anchors when direction feels unclear, and acting in alignment with them keeps you oriented even without complete answers. Understand that growth is cyclical, not linear, and moments of rest, reflection, and recalibration are not setbacks but necessary phases of strengthening. Do not allow comparison to distort your perception, for each